Hi, what's going on, everyone? This is Bob with 1L and Back, and in this video I'm going to be talking specifically about one of my favorite topics, something that is unique, I think, to my system, at least the way that I like to talk about it, and that is the bet, right? Every bar question has a bet. No, we're not talking about the bet like in Vegas. Anybody that knows me knows I really shouldn't be hanging around the casinos anyway, so we're not going to worry about that type of a bet. We're going to talk about the bar examiner's tactics, the bar examiner's techniques. You might even call them the bar examiner's tricks, although, like I've said in several other videos, there are no tricks on the bar exam. Any decent bar prep coach is going to tell you the same thing. There are no tricks. Still, I think it works for the purpose of our acronym, so we're going to call this the bet, right? Every bar question has a particular technique, a particular tactic that the bar examiners are using in order to determine where students are going to get the question right or question wrong. This is an area that there's going to be some stratification. This is an area where people are either going to see what the bar examiners are doing, they're going to recognize what they're doing and get the right answer, or because either they've read too fast, because they're intimidated, because they don't know the definition, for whatever the reason is, they're going to not understand what the bar examiners are doing, and then they're going to, when they go look at the answer choices, there's going to be an answer choice that anticipates that wrong type of thinking, and students are going to pick that, and that's how they end up with the wrong answer. So we have to be able to identify what the bet is for every bar question that we look at, right? Every MBE question has this particular technique that the bar examiners are using. There's more than one. I think they really fall into 5 main categories, right? So I'm going to talk about those 5 in this video. But before we even get into that, let's just take a second. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's actually true, and I think it's helpful, right? The bar examiners, they're people just like you and me, right? The people that write these bar questions. Now, they've done this a little longer. They've got some more experience, but put on their pants the same way, right? They get a hangover if they drink too much tequila. They've got crazy ex-boyfriends and girlfriends that are stalking their Instagram, right? I mean, here's the point. They're normal people. And how they have learned to write these questions is not some black magic, dark art that's inaccessible to us. We just have to recognize what they're doing. And once we do enough of these questions and we can start to see, this is the technique that they're using. This is the tactic that they're using at this spot in the question. Good news, really good news, most questions only have 1. Some of the really hard questions have 2 and sometimes 3. But again, we don't really even have to worry about that, because once we understand what this is, once we get this concept of the bet in each question down, it's going to be amazing. This is going to open up incredible worlds in terms of how easy these questions can seem. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's get into this. Okay, the very first thing that the bar examiners are going to like to do, this is our first category. This is answers that don't relate to the facts. And I used in my first video, we go back to the 10 things that you have to know before you approach the bar exam, and I think that's really where you should start. What we will see in bar questions, in the answers to bar questions, we will see correct statements of law, correct statements of fact, but that have nothing to do with the facts of our questions. So the example that I use in that video is if we have the police, they're going in, they do a search, that's an illegal search. They don't have a warrant, right? Maybe they have probable cause, but they don't have a warrant. Nonetheless, they kick down the door and I've got cocaine everywhere, all over the house, right? The point is that one of the answer choices will vary. If the question is the evidence admissible, the answer choice that a lot of students are going to pick, especially if you're trying to reason through the question, if you're trying to look at each answer choice and think, does that make sense? The answer choice, yes, it's admissible if I consented to the search, is going to seem like it's a good answer, because that's true. Well, if I did consent to the search, that would be admissible. The problem, where people will make mistakes, where the bar examiners will get you, is that the facts don't say anything about me consenting to the search. I wasn't even home. The police had probable cause. They knew I wasn't home, and so that's when they decided to go do this search. They kick down the door and they seize all this evidence. Well, if I wasn't there, how did I consent to it? I didn't consent to it. The facts didn't say anything about me consenting to it. So just the fact that we have answer choice D that says yes, if Bob consented to the search, that's going to get people because they're going to say, yeah, consent is a valid exception to the warrant requirement. And so they're going to talk themselves into that incorrect answer. And that's what we want to try to avoid. So an easy one, and what we're going to see, a lot of these techniques, a lot of these tactics that the bar examiners use are simple. I mean, really all this is recognizing, okay, yeah, this answer choice is talking about something that didn't happen in the facts, therefore it can't be the correct answer. Simple, but that's one of them, right? So I said there's 5, boom, 20% there. Let's move on to the next one. Another way the bar examiners love to get you is what I will call the familiar situation, but with subtle changes. Let's take this same example that I've just given you. The bar examiners are able to write, if you think about all the questions that are out there, there's thousands out there in circulation on the internet, right? In terms of like official bar questions, maybe not all that NCB have released, but in terms of like MBE style legit questions. The reason why we can have so many questions, why it's actually not that hard to write bar questions once we learn how they're written, is that all we have to do is we take that same situation I just gave you and we change the facts a little bit. So now let's say I am home. The police come, they knock to the door. Hey, Bob, we'd like to come in, take a look around. Sure, come on in. I forget that I actually have all the cocaine sitting out on the kitchen table. That's my bad, but I consented. There's a valid consent. Now, down in the answer choices, we're going to see that the consent answer, where it was wrong before, is actually correct. Now, if you're somebody that's going through doing a bunch of questions, you see a fact pattern and you read it, and let's say the first time you did it, you went through and you focused on the answer choices too much, and you got the question wrong because you chose the consent answer. And then, why did I get the question wrong? Oh, I see. Okay, the facts didn't talk about consent. 30, 100, whatever, how many questions later, maybe a week later, whatever, you get what looks like the exact same question. Anytime you're going through doing bar prep, and any good bar prep program will do this to you purposely, it will make you think that you're getting the exact same question. It will look almost identical, right? In terms of if we were going to compare how the questions are written, 90 plus 98%, it's the same. But one sentence, one half a sentence is going to compel a different answer. And if we're not reading closely because we say, I've seen this question before, this was the one I got wrong, especially if we didn't really take the time to think about why we got it wrong, we just said, oh, okay, when I see the one about the cops come to the door with no warrant, it's, yeah, okay, no warrant, yep, that's there. And we don't read that now this fact pattern is not the exact same. It looks the same, it reads the same. If we're tired, if we've done too many questions, if you're doing it on your phone in your commute and you're not really paying attention, whatever, all good stuff. The problem is that if we're not reading closely, if we're not paying attention, again, the bar examiner's got an easy one over on you. They got an easy 40% of the country to miss a question just because it was a familiar situation where they made a little subtle change. They count on the fact that you've seen this fact pattern before. They're going to vary it a little bit and they're going to get a wrong answer. The bar examiners love to do this, right? Because they only release so many questions a year, and they know that students who are preparing for the bar are going to see familiar fact patterns, right? If you do bar prep long enough, you're going to see that, like anything else, it's kind of a finite number. I mean, if we really think about it, yes, could we write an infinite number of bar questions? Of course, right? Make all these little subtle changes. But in terms of really getting our arms around the issues that the bar examiners are going to test on, there's really a finite number of issues. And what's the best way to test some of those issues? Well, there's really only 2, 3, or 4 ways to test a lot of these issues in a way that makes any sense. So the bar examiners know that. They know that you're going to have seen the adverse possession fact pattern, 300 times before you take the bar exam. And they're going to count on you being familiar with a fact pattern. Felony murder is a great example of how the bar examiners do this. They'll set up a fact pattern that looks like it's going a certain way. It looks like it's a felony murder question, but then they throw something else in there at the end that completely changes it. But if you are only skimming it, oh yeah, this is the question that talks about felony murder. Yep, let me go down and pick the answer about felony murder. Why did I get the question wrong? It's because it's a familiar situation, but they made a subtle change. Okay, so that's number 2. The next 2 that we're going to talk about are similar, but there's a subtle difference, and they both have to do with elements. The first one, and this is the third of our overall 5 that we're talking about, the first one is we're going to see mismatched elements. We're going to see the bar examiners take the elements of one tort, let's say, one issue, because again, all of this can be broken down into elements. Civ Pro is another good example. This is a great example, actually, in terms of talking about motions, right? And they will give you a fact pattern that talks about summary judgment. And they'll give you the right answer choice, but the standard will be using the standard for a judgment as a matter of law. So, we're looking at it. We recognize that it's a summary judgment question. Okay, should the case be dismissed? And then we know that the answer is going to be yes, but there's going to be 2 answers. One is going to say yes if there's no genuine issue of material fact, and one is going to say yes if no reasonable juror, if the reasonable jury wouldn't have a legally sufficient basis, blah, blah, blah. Same answer, both yes, our plaintiff in that case is going to lose in both cases, but for 2 different reasons. One is because there's no genuine issue of material fact, and one is because there's not a legally sufficient basis to support a finding. Each of those 2 things that I just gave you, those 2 definitions, those 2 standards, are tied to a particular motion, right? And so what this is going to be is we need to see that if the question is about summary judgment, we need to pick the issue that talks about no genuine issue of material fact. So we can see that if we don't know these individual issues, right, whether it's a motion, whether it's a tort, whether it's a crime, whether it's a defense in contract, if we don't know those cold, know all of those elements cold, we're going to struggle, because we're going to see that summary judgment is a matter of law. If you're somebody that never wanted to be inside of a courtroom, never wanted anything to do with that, it sounds the exact same thing, right? I mean, because in both cases, the plaintiff is losing. Now, of course, we understand procedurally it's in a different spot in the case, but the facts may obscure that for us. What we have to know is that summary judgment equals genuine dispute, right? Summary judgment equals is there a genuine dispute, and judgment as a matter of law is a question about sufficiency of evidence. And so you can see here where this is what the bar examiners will do. They will give us answer choices that mismatch different elements. Another great example how they do this is when they talk about a negligence. They will give you a negligence per se hypo. A negligence per se, we know that's the one that talks about the breaching of the statute, right? So it'll be a statute about, let's say, speeding. And the answer choice is somebody speeding, right? They're speeding in the zone, the construction zone where you're not supposed to be speeding. And they God forbid, injure or kill the construction worker that's there, right? We've all seen the signs on the highway, right? If the answer choices talk about, let's say, again, I'm the driver, and okay, is Bob going to be liable? Well, if they've given you the statute, and we're going to talk about how we know this in more depth in some videos, but we know if we see a statute in a question, we know we have to be thinking about negligence per se. The answer choices are going to be talking about me causing a harmful or offensive contact. They're going to talk about me having intent or lack of intent. They're going to talk about me breaching or not breaching a duty. All of those other things, and they're going to write them in ways that sound good. But all of those other things, all those other answer choices are talking about, they're using elements of other torts, of other concepts. And the bar examiners love to do this because when we first start going through, we think this, our brain, we can make the connection. We can say, okay, yeah, they're using the language that talks about negligence, but this answer really sounds better than the answer that talks about negligence per se. Or the conclusion that the answer that talks about negligence is coming to is better than the answer that is using the language of negligence per se. That's wrong. And no, please do not do that. Do not do that. It is not interchangeable. If the question is talking about battery, we can only pick an answer choice that talks about the elements of battery. Another great example is attempt. The bar examiners love to do this. They will give you a question and the fact pattern sets up looking like it's going to be about, again, like a felony murder. And they'll give you all the stuff and make you think it's a felony murder question. And then the call of the question is going to say, if Bob is charged with attempted murder, will he be guilty? That one word, the fact that they've thrown attempt in there, now means that the correct answer choice must and shall can only then talk about intent and a substantial step. We know, and we'll get into this in the crim videos, right? But we know that attempt is made of two elements. Attempt is made of an intent and a substantial step. The answer choices that talk about felony murder in a question where the facts are all suggestive of felony murder, but the call of the question talks about attempt, that's going to be the wrong answer because the call of the question is ultimately what's going to dictate how we analyze those facts or how we read those facts. What we do with those facts that we've read is probably the best way to say it. What we do with those facts that we've read closely, that's going to be dictated by the call of the question. And so what we need to understand at this point, kind of in this moment, is that the bar examiners love to mismatch elements. That's what we need to be on the lookout for. That will get you, if you can get that, mind blown. I mean, in terms of to be able to see, okay, this is a negligence per se question. I have to be talking about the elements of negligence per se, right? Was there a statute? Was the statute violated? Did the harm materialize in the way that was contemplated in the statute? Was the person who was harmed, are they a person who was part of the protected class the statute's designed to protect, right? Those are the elements that the correct answer is going to have. And again, even if the conclusion is no, so let's go back to our summary judgment one for a second. Let's say they give you facts that are suggestive that, yeah, this thing, that there's going to be, there's no genuine dispute of material fact. And that's how the facts read, right? The facts are saying, yeah, there's not really a dispute here. But then of the answer choices, there's only one answer that talks about genuine dispute of material fact. But the answer says there's not there is a genuine dispute of material fact. Let's say you've read the answer, you've read it, and the facts are all saying, well, it doesn't sound to me like there's a genuine dispute of material fact, but the call of the question is asking me about summary judgment, and only one of these answer choices is using the correct elements in coming up with their answer. So even though the conclusion is not something I agree with, even though the conclusion is wrong, right, and put big air quotes there if you're listening to this on audio, even if that conclusion is wrong, quote unquote, it's the correct answer because we're applying the correct elements. And so that is a huge, huge thing. Be aware of the mismatched elements. That's our third one that we want to be on the lookout for. Our fourth bar examiner technique, bar exam tactic, right, what the bar examiners will do. That fourth one also deals with elements. It's really simple. They'll just remove an element. So for negligence per se, right, we have those elements that I just went through. Let's say we remove one of those elements. Let's say the harm materializes in the way that it's contemplated in the statute. Let's say that the person who's injured is a member of the protected class. And let's say we know there's a statute. But let's say the facts also say that I didn't violate the statute. Well, if I didn't violate the statute, are all the elements for negligence per se met? No. And so can we have a negligence per se answer? No. Now, I don't want to confuse that with what we just talked about, because again, they're not at opposites. They actually go together, right? The correct answer will, if we're talking about a case where there's mismatched elements, the correct answer will be the one that applies the elements, that includes the actual elements that the question is talking about. If we're talking about whether or not all the elements are there, a great example of this one will be like determining whether or not the court has subject matter jurisdiction. They will set it up looking like all of the elements are there for diversity, but maybe it's a corporation that's the defendant, and that corporation has a principal place of business in the same state as the plaintiff trying to bring the suit, even though they're incorporated in a different state. So if we're going through quickly and we're looking at it, okay, amount in controversy set, they're sued for more than $75,000. Okay, the business is incorporated in state B, our plaintiff's in state A. Yep, looks like diversity set. Oh, but wait a minute. We have to remember that for a corporation, that they can be a citizen of more than one state. Diversity is destroyed. It looked like we had all the elements for diversity, but one element was missing. And this is how they can come up with hundreds and hundreds of questions. We can write a fact pattern, and then we can just remove an element. And so for every question, and literally this is how it works, right? So for a question that has 5 elements, something like adverse possession, we can write 5 different adverse possession questions, which are essentially the exact same question. All we're doing is just removing one of the adverse possession elements. And we can write them in such a way that if you did them in sequence without thinking through this, without knowing the right way to do it, you could get really confused and frustrated, because I could tweak it so I could make the wrong answer seem correct and the right answer seem wrong. That's why we don't want to get bogged down in answer choices. We want to recognize what are the bar examiners doing. And a common technique, a common tactic that they use is to give you all of the elements and then just remove one of them. If they've given you all the elements and then they've removed one, the elemental test is not satisfied, and 9 times out of 10, that is all of the thinking, all the analysis that we need to do to arrive at the correct answer. So I've given you the 4 main ways that the bar examiners will manipulate this. The 5th area, the 5th tactic that the bar examiners will use is the information overload. In some other videos, I talk about this like a blitz in football, right? If you're not a football fan, that's okay. The concept, the idea is that when the quarterback takes the snap, if there's a blitz, the defense is trying to rush more people at the quarterback than they have blockers for. And so what ends up happening is that the quarterback has less time to make a decision on where to go with the ball. The hope is that quarterback panics and makes a mistake. Bar examiners will do the same thing when they give you those fact patterns that are a page and a half long, or one full column long, right? 5 paragraphs of civil procedure nonsense that makes absolutely no sense, right? 5 pages of stuff that Congress is debating about trying to do. And then really we see at the end, they're trying to create this new area of original jurisdiction for the Supreme Court. Yeah, they can't do that. The answer in a lot of those where it's really long, where the bar examiners are giving you all that information overload, the good news is those are actually the simplest questions. Because again, they're not going to give you something that's going to take more than 2 minutes to read. If you sit down, if you're going through with that fine-tooth comb and you're reading one word at a time, right, and talk a little bit about that in a second. But if you're going through, you have time to read it. You don't want to read it. I don't want to read it. I mean, the first thing when you open up that exam and the first question is a page, or, it takes up that whole first page, and then the letters are on the second page, it's like, you know what I mean? That's what I say anyway. The point is, we don't need to take that approach, because we recognize, just like in football, when the defense sends everybody at the quarterback, where is the defense not? It's not in the secondary. It's not covering the receivers. As long as we can stay calm, right? That's a big thing for me. As long as we can stay calm, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Okay, yeah, they gave me this whole big thing. It was all garbage, but I recognized, because once I read through it, I got to the sentence that said the Supreme Court is trying to get, or Congress is trying to give the Supreme Court original jurisdiction over this area of law. I know, because I memorized the rules, that Article 3 fixes the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, meaning Congress can't expand or restrict the size of the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. The fact that they gave me a page worth of nonsense, it doesn't matter to me, because I know what the bar examiners were trying to do. And yeah, even if it took me 2 minutes, maybe worst case, a little 2 minutes and 10 seconds to do that question, that's okay, because I know I got the answer right. And the next question is going to be an evidence question where the hypo is, this long. It's one sentence. So as long as we don't get bogged down and spend 7 minutes on a question or 10 minutes on a question, or worse, even than that, spend 4 minutes on every question, because then we definitely won't have enough time. As long as we stay calm, we recognize that if we have a really long question, what the bar examiners are doing there is they're trying to give us that information overload. They're trying to intimidate you. They're trying to say, look, bar taker, you're never going to get through all this. And even if you did, you don't understand it. And the answer choices, by the way, are just as long and just as confusing as what we wrote up here. You may as well just punt on this one because, hey, it's only worth 1 point. The problem is if you buy into that, if you get intimidated, you play into their game, there's enough of those questions on the exam that they can convince a person who's not confident, yeah, you really don't know this, you should pick the weird Latin answer and move on to the next one. What does Bob say? Don't. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Don't panic. Do not panic. Okay, so those are our 5 most common that we need to be on the lookout for. So we'll just run through them again. And remember, we have the answers that don't relate to the facts. We have the familiar situation with the subtle changes. We have our elemental ones, either a single element's missing or we have mismatched elements. And then finally, we have this idea of information overload. But that is it. Those are the 5 most common techniques, the 5 most common tactics the bar examiners are going to use to try to intimidate you, to try to get you to go down the wrong path. But again, remember, as I say, hey, they're just regular people too. They write these questions, on a laptop or on their computer, just like you're watching me right now. We can do this. We can do this if we understand how these questions work. How these questions work? Well, they have some facts. They have a call of the question. And somewhere in there, we have a bet. Somewhere in there, we have this bar examiner technique, right? We have this thing that the bar examiners do that is designed to get 50% of the students to choose the wrong answer. As long as we understand what they're doing to us, there's nothing to be afraid of. But that's it for this video. As always, I love each and every one of you guys. Hang in there. We're going to get through this. See you in the next video.